Hello, my name is Carrie and welcome to my channel. Today I am going to be talking about the books that I read in February, and I wanted to be on theme with some pink and red. I think that these are kind of like the colors of February, so I wanted to wear something fun for the occasion, even though I am definitely filming this a little bit later than February, but I have some books that I really enjoyed that I am excited to talk about today. So I am gonna jump right in to the statistics for the month. I read only 5 books in February, and that was about 1,330 pages-ish. Of those 5 books, 4 of them were audiobooks and 1 was a physical copy. 4 of them were actually books that I own. Finally, I'm getting a little bit deeper into my backlog of books. And one of those books was actually borrowed from the library. In terms of the background of the authors that I read from, 80% were white authors, 20% were black authors. I only read from Western-centric countries, so the United States, Canada, and Ireland were the 3 that I read from. I had a much higher average rating for this month, which was at 3.9, which I am so happy about. And I think that was really reflected in how I looked back and thought about these books when preparing for this video. I really remember the books that I read in February pretty vividly because I enjoyed them so much, which is a great reprieve after January. However, I did still have a DNF in the month of February, and that was Wintering. I can't remember the author's name. I think it was like Katherine something. This is a book that a lot of people have talked about because it isn't actually about like winter, but it is more about reconceptualizing the season of winter, looking at it as a way to not just rest and recuperate, but also try new things and to really put your life into perspective. And I enjoyed this concept, especially in terms of giving yourself, time and grace to recover from things, to rest. However, much of this book is really out of touch for me. I made it to, I think, like 20-ish% of the way into the book, and so much of it were things that I just cannot take as advice. Like, the author is recommending just take a year off of work. That is not feasible for everyone. Saying, well, actually just like go on a holiday to like another country where there's a beach and you can have sun. Again, not something accessible to everyone, especially immediately. So I found it very difficult to continue on because I just do not think that I related to the author that well. And in her writing, she was really unaware of how unapproachable many of these things were for the average person, which just made it even worse, in my opinion. I did not finish that one, but now let's talk about the books that I did finish in the month. I'm gonna start off with the worst book, which is actually not that bad, but it was my lowest rated book for the month, and then I will walk us through the other books that I read. First up to bat is Small Things Like These by Keegan. This is a pretty well-known book that is hard to give a synopsis of. It is essentially the story of a man who is going through his daily life and routines in the lead up to Christmas. He sees something that makes him really take a step back and reflect on what he should do in the situation. And because of this situation, he is reminded of his childhood. This leads him to really try to decide, what is right and wrong to do here? What are the consequences that may happen to me from this? I gave this one about 3 stars because this is such an odd story. I really wish it was longer, but I also understand why it wasn't. This is a story that is very allegorical in terms of what is right and what is wrong here. How do we conceptualize ethics in terms of things that we know are wrong, but that if we do something about brings us consequences? I really liked the way this was explored through the book. I think that this was an excellent reminder of why we need to lean into community and take action when there are injustices that we see happening, even if that is inconvenient to us, even if there are going to be consequences for us. I think that was the strongest message that I took away from this book. I also will argue that this book is best described as quiet because there's a lot of things in this book that are unsaid, that are left in the silences between people, and I think even in the, introspective sections with the main character and him reflecting on his life, there are also things unsaid in that, and I found that to be interesting, but also there was so much more I just wanted to know about this story, about this town, about this person that we're following. I understand in many ways why that wasn't done here, but I just was left wanting a little bit more from it. I am pretty excited though, because I do believe that this was adapted into a movie with Cillian Murphy, and he's one of my favorite actors, so I am sure that will be amazing, but I haven't watched it yet. After that one, I had a buddy read. I have a very good friend who every few months we pick an audiobook to listen to, and we work on craft projects projects or personal projects together while listening to it. So our buddy read, I believe we started and finished this in February actually, A Grim Reaper's Guide to Catching a Killer by Maxie, Dara, and this is a paranormal mystery that follows a woman named Kathy who I believe, if I remember correctly, she is in her 40s, she is getting divorced and is also pregnant by her soon-to-be ex-husband, and she works as a scythe, and this role of hers is to help souls cross over. It's kind of like an office job in how it's described in the book and like the world building here. And at first I found a lot of the dialogue in this to be very cringy. I really disliked Kathy as a main character. However, there's a lot of growth that happens through this book and the characters become really endearing. I felt that the mystery was something hard to guess, and at times it was a little bit difficult for me to remember this was a mystery because it didn't feel like there was that much to it, but it does really come back to it later in like the last half of the book. I do hope that the later books, because I do know there is a sequel, I hope that they will expand more on the world building, because there wasn't a lot in terms of the different categories of deaths and like how that is managed. Even though it is briefly mentioned here, I believe the other books will cover that in more detail. And I would also really heavily recommend the audiobook for this because the narrator did an amazing job and it was genuinely hilarious, where they're like making jokes or like having banter sessions. It was definitely one that I'm glad I read it in the format that I did, because I think it would have been hard for me to keep with this one in a physical or ebook format. After that, I read Rogue Protocol by Martha Wells. This is the third book in the Murderbot series. I thought that this one was definitely better than the second one. I think that I enjoyed the new characters in this one a little bit more. This is where we start to see a little bit more of Murderbot's personality, which was really nice. Additionally, I felt that the mission and the crew in this were like a little more endearing in terms of I felt myself a little bit more emotionally attached to this group, and the mission, although like with this series, so many of the missions are so formulaic because they do follow this very specific structure that I'm hoping Martha Wells kind of moves away from in the future books, because I worry how long I can stay invested in a series that really keeps this momentum at a static pace, I guess I could say. I really enjoy learning more about Murderbot's personality, and the kind of staging in this makes me think that the next book is definitely going to be tying things back to earlier books. But again, I hope there are more surprises in the future. So those were my middling books for the month. And then I had two books that I would consider favorites that came out of February. The first one I'm going to talk about is one that I couldn't give it 5 stars because there were still parts to this book where I think things were underdeveloped, yet it was such a beautiful read, and that was How to Build a Boat by Elaine Feeney. This one was a book club pick for February, and I initially had very little hope for this because early on, many of the members from my book club really struggled with this book. And I understand why now, knowing that they were reading physical copies of it, because I did not know before this that Elaine Feeney is also a poet. And so when she is writing books, she is often using very poetic language. And then additionally, she is not using discourse markers or dialogue markers in her writing, which I know many people struggle with. However, when I listened to this on audio, I did not have to worry about those things because I couldn't visually see the text. And the way that it was read, there was such a cadence to the story. It was just so beautifully expressed, and I loved it. I loved the writing in this. I think that it really fits with the subject matter, because in this one, we are following a young boy named Jamie who we as the reader can understand from the first few pages is neurodivergent. His father is not looking to put a label on him and is instead looking to nourish and cultivate any of Jamie's interests and show him unconditional love in all the forms that he can. He does not look to label Jamie. He does not allow other people to label Jamie. He just sees him as, this is my son and I love him. However, at the beginning of the book, Jamie is enrolled into a Catholic school, and this is where some problems start to happen, where obviously, there are people in admin who want Jamie to conform to a very specific set of norms, both in the classroom and also in terms of life. And there are some kids who are being antagonistic and bullying him. We follow Jamie through this new experience and the kind of new community that he builds in this school. This is not an action-packed story. This is not a story following a series of events. This is a story following the characters. I personally loved that aspect to this book. I loved the characters. I thought that They were flawed and very realistic. Even when they were frustrating, they were lovable, and they showed these really beautiful and heartbreaking experiences with love, grief, loss, hope, the power of community, and people loving you no matter what and helping you because they care about you and care about the things that you care about. I really felt while reading this book that I reflected a lot on friendships in my own life, what I value in those friendships, and why I find them important to cultivate, to check in with people, to learn more things about the things that interest my friends, because this book showed how much love that just creates in the world. And I loved the writing, I loved the story. There were definitely parts of this book that I did not think were flawless or something that would, resonate with everyone or that everyone would like in terms of the structure of the story, the characters. In fact, in book club, there were many people who had very differing beliefs about this book and the types of ways that they conceptualize the characters or the story, the thematic nature of it as well. But I loved it, and I really see this being a book that I return to at some point in the future, because I have not stopped thinking about it since I finished it, and it has, to be quite honest, been several months now since I have finished this one. Now, last but not least, I have the book that I did give 5 stars to in February, and I do not regret this. I just fell head over heels in love with this book, and it was a romance book, which was even more shocking to me, and that was The Neighbor Favor by Kristina Forrest. I have had this book for a while. I think since the year that it came out, I just kept putting off reading it. The past couple years when I have tried to read more romances, I've been enjoying them less and less. This is one that I saw someone on Bookstagram talking about, and they were really raving about it. I was like, I have this on my shelf, why don't I just pick this up? I am so glad I did, because I read 2/3 of this book in one night. I could literally not put it down. Loved this story. I loved the characters. So we follow a girl named Lily. In the beginning of the book, she is communicating with this guy online. She kind of develops feelings for him. They're supposed to meet, and then he just totally cancels on her, and she doesn't know why. Fast forward a year later, she is working at a dead-end job that she really dislikes. She feels very stuck in this place in her life, and she has a new neighbor in her building who she tries to get to fake date her because her family keeps bugging her about if she doesn't start finding someone on her own soon, they're gonna set her up with people. And they have actually been trying to set her up with a lot of people, and they've all been disasters because she's not very good at dating. As a result of this, we meet our second main character, which is Nick. He is, at first, he's kind of portrayed as a ladies' man, although that's definitely not his character, but he kind of agrees to this because he has a secret, and it's a secret about Lily that he, and we as the readers, know very early on, but he cannot tell her. I loved both Nick and Lily in this. I think that both of them do such a great job of explaining the difficulties of being at a period of time in your life where you're in a massive transition, or you are stuck in a place where you are really unhappy and you don't really know how to get yourself out of it. I think that both of them felt very realistic, and I liked that kind of growth that we see from them through this book and the way that they change very subtly. I did not feel like any of the changes in this were really drastic. I loved the Green sisters, the other 2 sisters that Lily has, who surround her with love and support, even when ill-intentioned. And I'm so excited to follow on in the next 2 books with the sisters, not only in the hopes that I will see Nick and Lily again, but I do enjoy a series like this where it follows siblings and not only the connections between them through books, but them going off into their own lives and relationships, things like this. I especially am looking forward to, I think it's Iris's book, because she is a single mom. I'm suspicious of someone that was mentioned in the first book that I think will come back, and I'm really hoping that works out. But overall, really enjoyed it. My only slight hesitation in giving this 5 stars was that I do think there were some parts of Nick's story that I wish wouldn't have been saved until the end. I wish there had been a better slow reveal of some of that stuff, but I kind of understand why those events happened in the way that they did. And I like the way that Kristina Forrest dealt with it instead of it being, just a miscommunication or something like that. I think that she handled a lot of the tropes in this in a way that felt very refreshing and very realistic. I'm also really excited because I think she has a summer romance that is coming out this year as well. I really enjoyed her writing style, so she's definitely an author, even outside of the Green Sisters trilogy, that I would love to read more from in the future. Well, now those are all the books that I read in the month of February. I would love to hear your thoughts about these books, or hear what you have been reading whenever you may be watching this, because I already know this is not coming out in February, but I hope that you have had a really good beginning to the year and that you have been enjoying what you've been reading. So thank you very much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Happy reading! Bye!